I think we're about ready to get started. Well, first and foremost, thank everybody for joining us tonight for our next AMA for our candidate series. Tonight we have Representative Anthony Sabatini from Florida. He's currently a state representative for Florida's 32nd district, and he's currently running for U.S. Congress, Florida's 7th district. Anthony, if you don't mind giving us a little background about yourself, why you decided to run for Congress instead of staying in the State House, and anything else you want to let us know about you.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Okay, great. So I decided to run for office a few years ago. I was living in New York City. I moved up there for a job, and I was surrounded by woke, tard, radical left idiots. And that was the first time I'd ever been around really dumb leftist people. And so I decided that I just wanted to do something in politics to make sure these people weren't the dominant influence in our country and, just defeat them. So I moved back to Florida, ran for city council. And, one of the first things I learned when I got in politics is that most elected Republicans are complete and total RINOs, and they're a waste of everyone's time and money and effort, and they're oftentimes just as bad as the Democrats. So that was a big moment for me because I had thought for a few years at that point that most Republicans were good. Then I realized most of them were really just posturing and engaged in performance art and weren't really trying to move the needle on important issues. And of course, this is right when Donald Trump came on the scene and sort of changed all the rules, which was great, and fought the political correctness that I think is the biggest threat to the country today. Political correctness, identity politics, which go hand in hand. So I decided I wanted to get more involved. I ran for state house, beat a couple RINOs, got in the state house, and I'm universally considered the most conservative member of the Florida Legislature. I don't say that to brag. I just say that because most of the Republicans who are elected really don't do anything. The biggest problem we have in the party and in the movement is that most Republicans are always just playing defense. And you see that right now on the national stage. I mean, where is the Republican Party right now on vaccine passports and mask mandates and lockdowns and the border? It's just fucking embarrassing, how bad our party is. We have so much work to do. And so that's why, once again, I'm running for office again. I'm now running for U.S. Congress, District 7, because if I don't, it's just going to be another useless, dummy Republican who is a coward and afraid to fight the left, fight the media, and win on important issues. And I often describe myself as a America First, liberty Republican. I mean, I'm very rooted in liberty and less government, but at the same time, very interested in the America First issues, which are, I think, the existential issues, saving the border, saving gender, saving capitalism, saving things that are now under attack that have never been under attack in American history, but not losing sight of the basic role of government, which is to be basically as least intrusive as possible, but at the same time protecting normal institutions that keep our country together, keep America, middle class together, keep families together, etc. So that's how I would describe myself.
Very nice. I see. I think a lot of us can think that, or we see that Florida has become a spotlight across America, especially for us, in that a lot of what we want to see for the rest of the nation is happening down in Florida. And I think you're spearheading that quite a bit inside of Florida itself. Why don't you tell us about what you've done recently as far as legislation in Florida, or some things that are on your plate right now at the forefront?
Yeah, so I file a lot of bills. A lot of them end up in the news. Some pass, some don't. 5 of my bills have been signed into law by DeSantis, but a lot of them die because, even though Florida's doing a little bit better than the rest of the country right now, better than the other Republican states right now, they're not doing good enough. They're not moving. They're not trying to do what I call deinstitutionalizing the left. What we need to do, I think, at the state level is to destroy the left in our states. Defund parts of the university system and the corporate welfare, eliminate these insane local governments that push for, more leftist stuff and riots and everything else in their own states. And the Republican Party here is really not doing that. But I file a lot of bills that would encourage that and that kind of stuff. I mean, one bill I'm known for is I did the bill to stop transgender surgeries on children in the state of Florida, and we can't get that bill through because we got so many RINOs in the state house. So we did do a bill that stopped men from playing in women's sports, which is a much easier issue, I think, for a RINO to vote for. But it's still perfectly legal to slaughter and deform a 16-year-old child who's 12-year-old child who's experiencing gender dysphoria in the state of Florida, which is really quite sad. So there's that. I mean, lockdowns, we did better on the lockdowns in other states, but, DeSantis still locked this state down for a month and a half, which was terrible. We got to make sure that never happens again. And then more importantly, the local governments are out of control here. There's still mask mandates. They're still they're trying to do mandatory vaccination of their own county and city employees in the state of Florida. So I file bills to try to stop that kind of stuff. And, I'm also known for a bill to name the first Floridian president, name the longest road in Florida after the first Floridian president, which would be the Donald Trump Highway. It's the longest road in Florida, would be named after him. And I do that bill, but, obviously got to fight the establishment on that because they hate Donald Trump secretly. They can't say it publicly, but they do, obviously the Jeb Bush, Bush era Republican Party is still in power. They still run the institutions within the Republican Party, especially here in Florida. And they despise Donald Trump. But so those are some of the bills. I also, as a lawyer, I fight a lot of the leftism in the state. I sued 15 counties and cities that had mask mandates in our state. And actually, we won a few of those battles, which was pretty cool. But, still trying to move the needle on that. And, if you have questions about specific bills, I file a lot of bills. I filed at least 40 bills since I've got in the House. So.
Oh, very active, I would say. Recently, I saw in the news that you had brought up the fact of potentially doing audits on some places in Florida, or is it across the board in Florida?
Yeah, obviously, I think audits are good. My biggest fear is that 5-10% of our Republican friends are not going to vote again because they're just so blown away, just so discouraged by the fraud in other states. I don't know if Florida was really an issue, but what we really need is an audit to kind of show what was going on and show the public, how the system works and double check everything. And what's sad is the RINOs in the state are so afraid of being attacked by the media that they're not willing to do it. So I did a letter calling for an audit in the biggest counties, which happen to be blue counties, because they're the biggest counties in the state. And it's not being received well. The Secretary of State, who's an employee of the governor, is already pushing back on it. She's just another RINO, right? At the end of the day, the RINOs, their biggest thing is they'll do whatever it takes to evade being called mean names. Killing a good idea if it keeps the media from attacking them as a conspiracy theorist or racist or whatever. They'll do that. They're just controlled opposition. So that's what I'm up against right now. But we're going to keep pushing, and obviously the base and the momentum of the party is on our side. So we'll probably get some audits done here soon. We just did the letter calling for it 2 days ago, and we'll see what happens in the next couple weeks.
Nice. All right, before we take any questions, I wanted to point out that you have to be a active member of our server to be able to ask questions. If you're listening to us from the Lurker Lounge or from a Blue Pill Debater role, you can put your question in either one of the chats, and if we can get to it, we'll go ahead and ask it. But otherwise, we do have some people, and I'll let Damien go ahead and bring them up to ask questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started with one of our nimble navigators, Pamalui. Pam, go ahead and accept and take it away then.
Good evening, all. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us.
Thanks.
First question is, I think we're probably well aware of just how compromised, or I want to say threatened, Republicans are in especially the national representation in Congress. Why do you think that's the case? And is there something that can be done to expose their hesitancy besides just the media? Do you think there's some backdoor deals that investigative journalists can expose and prevent from happening in the future?
Sure. I think it's actually a really easy to answer question. It's simply voters aren't very good at choosing based on TV and mailers and this and that, who the real conservatives are. I'm using just true, like America First principle. Let's just say people who love our country, patriotic reps. They don't know the difference between one and another. So what happens is oftentimes the establishment is able to pick the person that can say or look the right way, but not really be somebody who wants to engage in conservative reform at the state or federal level, and get them in office. So what happens then is you have the majority of people who are not interested in actually conservative reform, doing anything, moving the needle on anything. Let's say it'd be masks, Second Amendment, pro-life stuff, borders, whatever it be. They don't really want to do anything. The real reason they're running for office, and this is obviously I think the case, easily understood is the case for about 90% of them in DC, is they're really serving simply for like the lapel pin and the power and the access and to line their own pockets and just their own influence or ego. They're not actually running because they're trying to change something. So it's like they're just posturing this position of just permanent defense, like, I'll get in, do what it takes to stay here and not want to really move anything unless I'm being yelled at by the left or the media. Then I'm willing to change things. So that's just a losing attitude and a losing posture, because you're always on defense. You're always going to end up giving in. We need people who want conservative reform. So the real reason we have all these issues is we're just choosing the wrong people again and again and again and again. That's still happening. It's actually worse now, kind of post-Trump or in the Trump era, because now all someone has to do is go there and say, I'm MAGA. And then, voters think that they're great. And what they don't realize is they're not really anything. They're just establishment shills, and they're going to continue to, just do nothing, be more like Mitch McConnell than anything else. But they know how to use the right buzzwords to get into office. So long answer, but we just need to be better at vetting who we're voting for in the primary. The primary is more important than the general, in my opinion.
And Pom, you had another question, or?
Oh yeah, thanks for that. That's a good point. My second question touches on election security. I usually ask this to a lot of candidates, especially you touched on earlier how Florida is now pretty much solid red. What can you testify helped secure that, particularly with Broward County, and what kind of election? It's kind of a two-part question. Just about Broward County specifically, what cleaned up there, and what election safeguards were removed from via COVID. I know you guys were only locked down for a month. And what election safeguards need to be restored and or added in Florida?
Sure. I wouldn't call it solid red. We're about a 0.2% red now. I mean, I think a normal candidate would beat a Democrat by 1.5%, 2%. That's not a lot. Obviously we're going into a red wave, I think, now in the midterm. So you're going to see whoever, Rubio and these guys are going to win by, I think, 6 or 7. But overall, we're still just slightly more red, still purplish. And that has more to do with just the migration down to Florida. A lot of conservative boomers are moving to Florida, and it's keeping our state red, and we're getting a little more red because of so many people moving here, especially since COVID. We're closing the gap. Democrats have actually always out-registered us in the state, but we have a lot of older Democrats who vote Republican, but we're closing that every single day in Florida. The Broward thing is sort of a myth. People think that there was all this fraud with Broward. There was, in one sense, they let people vote late. So there was a lot of voting, a lot of ballots that were coming in late that generally should have been disqualified. Yes, that was true, but that wasn't why the whole state was red. That accounted for maybe 10 or 20,000. Then they removed that supervisor of elections, and they sped up their tables of when they can, they were more strict about when they were accepting late ballots. Basically, if you don't have the ballots on the day of, they're not going to count. It's not like Pennsylvania where they're letting them in like 7-10 days later. So I think fixing that, which we did years ago, and then just enforcing it, obviously helped fix that county. But overall, we just have photo ID here. We don't allow a lot of late ballots. We don't have a million different locations where anybody can hide their ballot harvesting. We've already prohibited ballot harvesting, and it's hard to get away with in Florida. I think those are the big 2 or 3 things you can do to prevent election fraud. And there's more you can do. I think we need to clamp down on just no excuse mail ballot voting in general, but that's not something we've done yet in Florida.
Just quickly, I want to add real quick, Anthony. Do you know if Dominion has any machines down in Florida? I would assume that there's quite a few machines, but is there a
Oh, yeah,
Dominion or
absolutely.
Sequoia? Some of those other things. I'm actually an election judge, equipment manager, and during the elections, and a precinct captain myself, so I'm quite familiar with the process. I was just curious
Yeah,
if
so
Dominion.
yeah, so Florida has both ES&S and Dominion. I think both of them should be banned. I actually did a bill last year to ban any foreign election software or hardware, so that would ban Dominion. The Republican establishment didn't like it, and they killed it. The supervisor of elections, which used taxpayer money to hire lobbyists, didn't like it either, so they killed it. But I think they should be banned. I think we should probably just have our own state-owned, publicly understood, without any kind of trade secrets attached with it, software and hardware that the public knows and understands, and use that for all the elections. So I think that should be the goal. We shouldn't be using these private vendors any longer. But yeah, they still exist in Florida. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do the audit, is to put them on defense and make them explain what's going on, and prove how many ballots came in and how many there were, and whether there was any fraud, and show the chain of custody and all the rest of that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Gothics, you're up next for your question. Go ahead.
Hi, Anthony. I'm Guthix. Just wanted to ask about the bill you put up for in Florida for gender dysphoria and for the surgical procedures regarding children. Just curious about that and what the meat and bones of it was, just because of how that might have differed from my state with what we've done here.
Yeah, so my bill criminalized any surgery on a person for the purpose of changing their gender until they hit the age of 18. I think, obviously, once you hit the age of consent, you can do whatever you want with your own body. I'm very liberty-oriented in that regard, but as a child, you shouldn't be able to do that. So mine criminalized it, but the truth is, I was just as open-minded to a private cause of action that would have allowed a person who, like many of the kids I met who reverted later, like they would do a transgender surgery, then hit like 20 or 21, outgrow the gender dysphoria, and then have second thoughts, and then try to transition back, but they're already scarred and kind of psychologically messed up from it. Anyways, allowing those people to have a cause of action where they could sue those so-called doctors was another approach that I was open to. But we went with a criminal statute that just made it straight up illegal. And it failed because, because the Republican establishment, once again, the principle of the RINOs and the establishment is, what do I have to do to avoid being called mean names? And as soon as the media started this narrative of, oh, they hate transgender kids, they're trying to deny life-saving care to, children in need, who are experiencing gender dysphoria, blah, 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 blah. They're evil Republicans. They just killed it. They killed the bill. And, it's sad, but that's what they'll do every time until we get the right people in office who actually have balls.
Wait, did you guys try to do anything with your state with Medicaid with that, or was it just making it?
No, but I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea, and that's a good approach. But now this would have just fixed it for everybody. Even if you had commercial insurance, you just can't do it. If you're a kid, you're not going to be able to get a transgender surgery. That should be the law, just like it is in Arkansas and other places.
Do you have any plans to present any more legislation on the subject?
Yeah, we come back in the session next month, or committee weeks rather, and then I'm going to file the same bill again. And DeSantis said, because he got hounded by the media on it, he said, "Yeah, I would sign that bill if the legislature did it." And so now it's up to the legislature, but we'll see what happens with the very moderate, centrist Republicans in the Florida legislature, which generally, whenever we squeak out these conservative wins that other states get jealous about, oh wow, it's going so good in Florida. It's mostly because the governor just really held the legislature to task. It's almost never organically. The legislature's chock full of RINOs.
Oh, wow. Hey, I was going to ask, I have two questions. My first question was if you were open to a different leader than Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. And then the second question was what you would do about us spending so much money in foreign countries like gender studies in Pakistan and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously on the second easier question, I would 100% just, I'm very liberty oriented, almost libertarian in the sense of I'm not for really any foreign aid whatsoever to any country for any purpose. So that just very easily fixes that. I just don't believe in foreign aid. I'm very America first in that regard. On the Kevin McCarthy thing, I have zero plans, zero interest whatsoever in ever supporting Kevin McCarthy, even if he's the only person running for speaker. I'm trying not to be super public about that yet because I know that he's a very vindictive person and he's willing to put millions into a primary to destroy a Republican that comes out that way. So I'd rather him just kind of be neutral in my race and then win, then make that public. But once I win my primary, I'm going to make it clear that he's a failed leader. He has no leadership quality. He has no ability to lead on any of the important conservative issues in our time. And he's just really a limp-wristed, kind of boring, stupid figure that can't grow the movement whatsoever, just very weak and defensive and has no business even being in anywhere in leadership, much less the speaker.
All right. Thanks, Freedom, for your question. Next is Free. I like these names today.
Hey, how's it going? Anthony, your intentions seem to be in the right place, but to properly govern, someone must understand how the government was designed to function. From what I've heard so far, you seem to be on the right track, but I'm curious, have you ever read the Federalist Papers or the anti-Federalist Papers? Most have read the Constitution.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just read this and then you can answer if that's cool. Most have read the Constitution, but far fewer have read these documents from the founders, and they're packed full of wisdom about our republic. If you haven't read them, I highly recommend you read through them because it will make you a far more effective politician. Lastly, do you have a favorite founder?
It's a lot of questions. Yeah, my favorite founder is Thomas Jefferson by a landslide. I've read all the Federalist Papers, all of them. My favorite is number 10 and number 51, some of the most famous ones about factionalism. But I like all of them. I'm generally, I double majored in history and philosophy as an undergrad at the University of Florida. I went to law school, so I read the Federalist Papers at 3 or 4 different times in my life. I'm actually reading them right now for a political fellowship I'm a member of called the Claremont Institute Lincoln Fellowship. I'm a Lincoln Fellow, and we're reading them again. So I read the Charles Kessler edition, which has a really good intro. And yeah, I recommend everybody read them and understand them. And yeah, they give very good insight into the Constitution. And right now, that's a problem. We have a big problem with Republicans who don't understand our Constitution. They think they do. They don't actually understand it. And obviously, the Federalist Papers are the best exposition of it, so they should all read it. Yep.
Very nice. Thanks for your question, Free.
I've got some written questions if you'd like.
Sure, let's do that for right now, and then we'll get Trump Team Atlas up here again.
So Anthony, this is Damien Wright. Nice to finally meet you here. One of our regulars, Chewy, has a question for you. He was asking how you feel about the shady marketing practices of the RNC, namely fear mailers, emails alleging to be from Donald Trump, and constant barrage of text messages.
Yeah, it's super shady. The RNC needs a massive leadership change. They obviously can't keep Ronna McDaniel there. I think they need to put somebody new there that's more edgy. I think she's just a failed leader. I think they need some serious reform. But it's the nature of the beast. It's an institution that is built to serve the establishment and rip off voters. The Republican Party always gaslights and screws its own voters, and it really hates its own base, but uses them to enable themselves. So until we can get rid of these politicians and these types of creatures that are in the Republican Party, and especially the political consultant class, which I think is one of the biggest, worst parts of the swamp, we're going to have a lot of issues. So, look at your state committee man, state committee women, and your national committee man, national committee woman, the people that are actually voting members of the party, and take a look and see if they're any good. If they're no good, you got to run against them. I'm always trying to fight to get some better people on as the national representatives for Florida in the RNC. Until you get some better people in there, it's not going to change.
Sounds good. Let's try Trump Team
They
Atlas
still,
again.
remember, they're very cozy with people like Frank Luntz. I mean, look who they actually pay
Yeah,
and
that's
spend
true.
time with. And this that scumbag Justin, I forgot his last name, drawing a blank on his last name, Justin Reimer, the attorney for the RNC, that totally stabbed the Trump campaign in the back, is still there. He's still the head general counsel for the whole RNC. It shows you how corrupt they are.
Yeah, that's true. Damien, go ahead and read your next question that you have.
Sure. K-Mox was actually curious if there was any major litigations that you wanted to push that just off the top of your head, like your top 3.
Wait, say that again. So major litigation I want to push on what topic, or just you mean on anything?
Just anything off the top of your head. It was a pretty open-ended question I think you wanted to ask. Oh, legal.
Well, there's a lot of litigation I want to push, and as a lawyer, I like to be part of it. I mean, I do a lot of it on my own. I still practice law. A lot of it's state and local stuff. But if I was going to say what are some lawsuits that need to occur at the federal level, a lot of them are actually already in motion. I signed on to a amicus brief yesterday about overturning Roe versus Wade, which we might have a shot of doing. I think we need to be pressing. We need, honestly, it's really, I'll just be this blunt about it. We need a lawsuit based on every single executive action that Biden takes, literally every single one. I assume that's what Stephen Miller and some of these other legal minds that came out of the Trump administration are doing with their legal institutes, because there's a couple that started already. One of them is the one Stephen Miller has. I think it's called America First Legal or something like that. They just, every time there's an executive order, which is, as you know, there was like 80 in the first month, there just needs to be a lawsuit to challenge it. You know, get it in court, get them on defense, and hopefully get in front of some Trump judges. That's what the left does. So everything they do, and everything they're doing, education, immigration, healthcare, obviously the biggest fights are the ones I want. If you mean like which ones I wish we would win, I mean, I hope we can strike down this mandatory vax order for all federal employees that Biden's talking about today. But just anytime they do anything, we need to file a lawsuit, and it should be funded by the RNC. But of course, they're spending it on their corrupt consulting class buddies, whining and dining them, and going out and lying to the voters and spending the money on bullshit instead of actually the lawsuits. But whatever, we'll see what happens.
A lot of people are saying that, quote unquote, our side definitely should be pushing lawfare more than we had in the past. Would you agree with that?
You said Lochner?
Lawfare, yeah. Like using the levers of power.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously that's like a term, a disparaging term. They try to say like, oh, it's lawfare, but the truth is, no. We need to sustain a legal challenge against every single thing that the Biden administration does. And that's what I did in Florida when the local governments did what they did. They passed curfews, we sued them. They did mask mandates, we sued them. We were trying to sue them on lockdowns, but DeSantis ended the lockdowns pretty quick, which was good. Not quick enough, should never happen, but we sue on everything, and you never know when you're going to win, but you got to make the sustain a legal challenge, because it has a political effect too, because once they realize that you're going to get sued and they don't want to fight it, it makes them hesitant to act in some cases. And it also makes them hesitate on doing something heavy-handed, because I think it can be struck down. So you just do it every single time. And I mean, I guess that is an apt description, lawfare, but at the end of the day, it's just the right thing to do. If you think it's unconstitutional, you think it's illegal, you think it's abuse of executive power, in the case of the executive actions, it should sustain a legal challenge, period.
For sure. Blue Line Frog is up next. He has a question. I hope it's a he. Sorry. You're on mute, Blue Line. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move him to the audience, and we're going to bring up G Money.
Hey, how's it going, Anthony? I appreciate you coming on here and talking with us today. Not so much of a question, but more of a statement. We met at SAS in Tampa. I just want to reiterate that college Republicans across the state of Florida are ready to back you and support campus carry, and we really do hope you can continue to push for that message, because it is important to college students across the state, especially in your local area up in Tampa. We really think this is something important that should come to campus soon.
Hey, man, I'm with you 100%. As you know, I've filed it twice. I'm going to file it again. Campus carry was the first bill I ever filed in the legislature, and we're going to keep fighting for it, because, like you, I went to college in Florida and law school in Florida, and I found it insulting that even though I was not a criminal, not a felon, not anything, I was being deprived of my fundamental right. So I'll file it again, and we'll see what happens. Of course, we're going into election year, and the RINOs love to kill good conservative stuff during the election year and say, "Oh no, we can't do that because they could use that against us." It's the old defensive Mitt Romney mentality that still pervades the party. But I will file it again, and we will try to get it going in the Senate too. And on the college Republicans thing, hey man, I got UCF is right on the border of the district. So if you know good college Republicans at UCF, University of Central Florida, I need a Sabatini for Congress chapter there. So I'd love to meet some of those guys and get them involved in the campaign.
That sounds great. I know a lot of people are wanting constitutional carry. What are your thoughts about that potentially happening if we get, I think we're 2 states away from calling a convention. Do you think that would be one of the things that would be on the docket for a constitutional convention?
Well, I mean, you could go federal, but you could just do it at the state level. So it's past 23 states nationally now. So I'm the first person to ever file constitutional carry in the history of the state of Florida. Actually, I was shocked to learn that it was never filed ever in the history of the state until I did it 2 years ago. And I did it, and it head spun, and the Republicans went crazy, and you had elected Republicans attacking. And in Texas, they had to do it 13 years in a row to get it done. And Abbott was afraid of it getting a primary challenge, so he finally did it after 13 years of fighting. So I just did it for the first time 2 years ago in Florida. They killed it. I followed it again last year, but now I got a bunch of co-sponsors. They killed it again. I'll file it next year, which will be my last year in the Florida House, and I expect to get even more co-sponsors. But it's just a mentality change because the RINOs are always going to say, "I can't believe you would suggest allowing a person to own a firearm or carry one without a license," and then eventually the psychology, the base catches up with the issue and they start holding their elected people accountable, and the Republican Party gets behind it. But it could be a while in Florida because, right, like I said, I'm the first one to ever file it. Most of these guys didn't even know what it was.
Very nice. All right, Blue Line, you're back up to try it again. Let's see if this works.
First, can you guys hear me? Okay,
We can.
Good. Anthony, thank you very much for joining us. So in my previous job, I actually had the unfortunate experience of interacting with Stephanie Murphy and her crew. And so through that, I got to kind of look into a little bit of what, what's happening on the NRCC side as far as them going after her position multiple times. And before I ask this question, first, I agree with you with the RNC leadership that there needs to be a lot of changes and it should have happened years ago. But here we are. But my question is, has the NRCC, who has previously used this as a targeted district, have they reached out to you? Are they helping you guys? Are they waiting? Kind of where is the party or the NRCC really in helping at least push out your message in taking out one of our opponents here?
Sure. So I'll start it this way. So the NRCC knew about me even months before I filed because they scout. They usually scout people in each district that they think might be running the next year, et cetera. They have like kind of minions that do that, who also try to get involved with the political consulting side to make money. So I had people reaching out saying, "Hey, are you running next year?" And I was like, at the time, I was like, "Nah." But with redistricting, everything has changed as right now that I'm running for districting, and that was more opportunities basically arose. So the seat that Stephanie Murphy court, which was very liberal, is now gone. They're all termed out. DeSantis appointed basically an entirely new court. So this new court we have is very conservative. So they're going to uphold our maps. So Stephanie Murphy knows this. She's likely not running again because they're just going to write a Republican seat. So it looks like I'm running against a blue incumbent, what's trending, what's becoming a trendingly more blue kind of district. It's actually going to end up being about a +5, +7 seat, and it's just going to be a brutal Republican primary. The NRCC knows this. The truth of the matter is they also know that I'm the biggest fundraiser in the race. So they play nice with me. I've met with them. They're friendly to me. But they know that I'm endorsed by Matt Gaetz. They know that I'm endorsed by the, Roger Stone and basically the MAGA wing of the party, and they don't like me for that reason. So they kind of keep their distance from me. But they're also just don't want to really get involved with the primary because they don't
They just don't want to waste their money or time, I guess. So they're just quiet right now. They're secretly going to try to back this other guy that's going to get in the race that's giving the NRCC a lot of money, but he's not even from the state. He's moving into, because everybody got tipped off about the seat because they know with the Charlie Crist seat and the Stephanie Murphy seat are being redistricted to become more conservative and by the state legislature. And so there's going to be like melee type primaries. There's going to be a lot of people in the primary. So there's already like 7 people in the primary. Most people don't even know who the people are because they're kind of like goofy candidates and they're not serious and they've never run for anything. But it'll be essentially a primary race, not a general election.
Very nice. We're gonna invite G Tiger up. All right, you're on the stage, G Tiger. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for joining us tonight. So my question's a little more lighthearted. I'm liking your energy tonight, and I'm seeing something I haven't really seen from many people in the Republican Party. Oftentimes, even on campus as a college student, it's like this milquetoast conservatism that's scared to be what it truly is. My question is really more of like advice. Like what advice do you have to me and maybe anyone else in the chat as a young person who wants to fight the same way you do, but may, see some concerns of, being called out, being called, the typical things like a racist, a homophobe, a bigot, all these things that they'll throw at you that isn't really even true. What's your advice to someone in college that's looking to, fight for this movement and fight for conservatism? What would you tell them?
I just tell them they really just need to dive in at this point. Don't hesitate, don't put your toe in the water. You just get in there and fight because first of all, it's a really good feeling. The best feeling in the world is you're always in purgatory and on the sidelines looking at all the things online and the issues politically and you're not involved. That's a horrible feeling. Once you get involved, once you're like really in the fight, it feels really good because, you're doing what you can. You're not just frustrated watching from afar. You're doing what you can and you sleep better at night. So just get in the fight. And by that, I mean, I can tell you to do a bunch of different things. Everybody's situation is different, but I can just tell you what I did, and I think it's probably good advice. First I joined some Republican clubs. I was living in New York at the time, so I grew up. I've lived in Florida almost my whole life, but I moved to New York City after college for a job for 2 years, and that's like I told you earlier. That's how I got involved because I never lived around such like far left anti-American psychopaths, and it kind of woke me up. I call my road to Damascus conversion to the Republican Party. So I started. You just go to some Republican clubs. It was the New York Young Republicans for me. Join some clubs, get to know some of the members, and then start working on campaigns. First thing I did is I came back to go to law school. I started working on the mayor of this small to medium-sized town called Gainesville. I started working on his campaign. He was Republican at the time, shockingly, his re-election campaign. And so I worked on that. Joined the REC, which is the Republican Executive Committee, and then I decided I wanted to run for office. So. I got on some advisory boards, which I got on like a city and county advisory board. And then the next year I ran for city council. I mean, the biggest problem I have with people in the Republican Party who want to be politicians or get involved or fight is that they always start like, oh, I'm running for U.S. Senator, I'm running for Congress. It's like, okay, I get it. But like, if you don't have infrastructure in place, you're not really going to have a good run of it. And you don't have a record either. So I ran for city council, won. Had a lot of fun on the city council, being a hard conservative in an area government where there really aren't a lot. Loved it. And then the next year I ran for, a couple years later, a year and a half later, I ran for state house. A year and a half, about a year later, I filed for it. Had a blast in the state house, ran for re-election. I was about as conservative as I could possibly be on the issues I think mattered. And got a big profile, got a following, and then now I'm running for Congress. So, just run for office, get in the fight, and it feels good. And don't be afraid to run for like something smaller or do things locally, not just run for Congress. I always meet people that are running for Congress in these like deep blue seats and like, just ridiculous long shot races. It's like serving the community in some way, be the chairman of the Republican Party in your county, do things like that. And it feels good and you can play a big role. And that's what I did. I worked in the party for a little bit before I ran.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have been trying to push people into the school boards and some of the township or village boards to start out with first, or even just working with somebody who's running for those and getting in on the campaign and helping out and working for the campaigns just to see how it all works before they take that next step along the line. And it sounds like you did a lot of that up front. All right, I'm going to invite Blazing Fury up to the stage real quick for his question. Yep, we can hear you.
All right. As someone had said earlier, thank you for being here tonight. My question is pretty short, but important. Do you have any plans to address the current bar on 18-year-olds from purchasing firearms within the state of Florida? And if so, what level of priority do you place that on?
Yep. So I filed that bill too. I filed a lot of bills. The bill to get rid of all the red flag laws, to get rid of the prohibition against 18, 19, 20-year-olds owning firearms, which is long arms, because it's a federal law that prevents 19 and 20-year-olds from having pistols. It's short arms, but so that, and then of course the prohibition or the waiting period laws. All of that is part of the Parkland gun control package that passed a couple years ago. And I do a bill that's a repealer bill. It erases all of that law. So when I ran for House in 2018, that was the hot topic. And I said, hey, I'm going to do a bill to get rid of this bullshit law that they're pushing. And I've done it every year. But as you can imagine, the people who wrote the bill, who are still in charge of the Florida House and Senate, don't like it, don't let it move. So it doesn't even get a hearing. But I file it every time, and I'll file it again. And it's a top priority. It's a fundamental right. I always tell people that Bill of Rights comes first for me, and constitutional rights always comes first. And that's obviously a fundamental constitutional right, so it's a top priority for me.
Great answer. All right, we're bringing up Nux to ask his question.
Thank you. Anthony, currently taxpayers are paying tens of billions a year, mostly in state taxes, for what is a very broken justice system where half of former felons end up reoffending. What kind of either criminal code or criminal justice reforms should we be pressing our state and federal politicians to tackle to help solve some of this, save taxpayers money, and reduce recidivism?
Sure. Yeah, no. Well, I'm generally very pro criminal justice reform. I co-sponsor most of the major pieces of criminal justice reform in the state, like the safety valve legislation, things that would get rid of mandatory minimums. And, obviously there's been a drop in violent crime, but there's still a lot of other types of crime. And so we need to be looking at all the statutes and just looking at what works. I'm for the complete and total decriminalization of marijuana. I don't know how I feel about every drug, but definitely marijuana should be completely off the table. And I filed, I co-sponsor the Democrat bills on that. I co-sponsor Democrat bills when they make sense, and sometimes on the criminal justice reform area they do. So I'd say mandatory minimums and marijuana decrim is probably the two top ones. There's parts of the criminal justice reform package I don't agree with. I think bail reform is pretty much nonsense, especially here in Florida where bail is really, really cheap, and it's a good accountability measure to get people to show back up in court. And, there's some other stuff too. It's kind of a complex area, but, that's kind of my general viewpoint on it.
All right. Thanks for the answer, Anthony. We do have a question from our Lurker Lounge. This is somebody who hasn't been vetted, but they did ask a pretty good question. He would like to know if there's anything that you can do, or the governor of Florida or the Florida Legislature as a whole, for the political prisoners that are being tortured in DC jail currently. He says he thinks more elected officials need to go to the jail and make a huge scene, and the reports from in there are horrifying. I've heard the audio of them singing the national anthem at 9 o'clock every night. Some of these guys are distinguished veterans and patriots, and they may have just gotten caught up in some of the, kind of the crowd mentality that was going on, but none of them have been charged currently with Insurrection Act laws. So
Yep.
what do you think you could do?
So I will tell you, and I'm on the record saying this will go down as one of the great political tragedies and travesties of our time. It's absolutely disgusting and
horrible what's happening. And I knew right off the bat that the RINO establishment was going to basically allow all of those people who were basically just trespassers, 99% were just trespassers. They walked in the building. They probably shouldn't have been there. The truth of the matter is they have a very illegal offense that they thought the building was open to protest in, like every other damn protester for the 9 months before did, these Black Lives Matter protesters, etc. Going into places illegally. Anyways, I knew that the RINO establishment was going to stab them in the back, and they did. So, like Paul Gosar, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you can count how many are actually sticking up for them and protesting and fighting for them. And had I been in Congress, I'd be right there with them. What can the state do? State elected officials like myself? Probably not much. I am going to file legislation that would prevent the Capitol Police from opening up a satellite office in Florida. I think the Capitol Police is the most partisan, left-wing, corrupt law enforcement agency in the country, behind the FBI and the CIA most likely, and should be prevented from ever being recognized as a commensurable, or having jurisdiction anywhere outside of, the Capitol building, et cetera, where they're actually allowed to be by federal statute. So you could fight the Capitol Police like I've done, and I'm going to obviously push for total reform of them, et cetera. But in terms of helping the prisoners, until I get to Congress, not much we can do. But I think what Gaetz and them are doing, especially today, is the right thing to do, which is to stage rallies at the prison. Today they tried to go there and they weren't allowed in the building. But that's what they need to do. They need to have rallies, massive rallies at the prison until those people are unleashed. But, historians look back, they'll look back at this and they're going to say that's how awful that these people were tormented and kept in solitary confinement, all for a basic trespass violation, which they arguably weren't even guilty of. It's just disgusting and awful, and that's how I feel about it. But as a state official, there's not much I can do. If they do a rally, I'm definitely going to fly up for it, though.
Yeah, for sure. I know Matt Brainerd from Look Ahead America has been doing a lot. He and his group, and we have some people from his group in here, and we've had him as a guest speaker here as well. I know they do Patriot rallies up there for the political prisoners that we have. So maybe it's something we can hook you up with Matt Brainerd and get potential cooperation there. Damien, do you have any further questions that you wanted to ask for other people that have typed in?
So there's one that came up here recently, so we've had that. Just you mentioned Matt Brainerd. Matt Brainerd and Ian Camacho of Look Ahead America. They've done a couple or at least one AMA with us here before. They come into our server all the time. I'm curious if you've seen their Wisconsin report that they just recently released on Tuesday. Either way, are you willing to look at their data in Florida as well?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Matt's a buddy of mine now. We just met each other a few months ago. I've spoken with him at a couple events, and I'm talking with him, and I've already committed to filing a bill based on what he and his people think are the best things the state of Florida could do to increase voter election integrity, which is a complex issue. But I'm going to file the bill that they think is best. And I always tell people on the election integrity front that they should follow Matt Brainerd and Look Ahead America, because that's who I'm following, and that's what I want to do. Was that your question, or did I mishear you?
Oh yeah, for sure. No, you got it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yep, good guy.
Another question that came from the same person. They were curious if you're willing to work with Representative Gaetz to free the Florida January 6 prisoners.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm the only elected official this whole congressional cycle that Matt Gaetz has endorsed. The only one. Good. He hasn't endorsed anybody else, and they all want his endorsement. There's some good people out there that probably deserve it. He's only endorsed one because we're good buddies, and he knows me. I mean, I've served with him. He served in the House before me, but he knows what I've done in the House, and he knows that I'm basically like him, an America First, liberty-centered candidate. And what he's doing is what I'll be doing. And I didn't hear what he had to say about the Florida-based January 6 prisoners, but I absolutely agree with it, whatever it is, just because I know his values. So I'll be on board.
Thank you.
Great. Looks like Palm has another question. We'll go ahead and invite Palm up to the stage.
Hey, y'all. First of all, I wanted to say thanks, Anthony, for serving. I just looked you up. Always, if I see anybody serve, I'll just say thank you. My first question is about, you mentioned research. Do you have any quick advice on how to do your research, or even on a primary candidate, or how do you get your information online? What kind of podcast do you follow?
What level of politics? Just everyday?
Yeah, just general advice for research.
Okay. Well, I mean, hell, I read a lot of Breitbart news. I read a lot of Revolver news. You know, it sounds funny, but one of the ways I can tell who are the good guys versus the bad guys, especially within the party. Remember, I said the primary is more important than the general, because if you choose the wrong people in the primary, it doesn't matter who wins in the general. You'll lose on the big issues every time. Look to see what the media is saying about them, right? So, like, take the Speaker of the House in Florida, a guy named Chris Sprouse. He's like a Jeb Bush era moderate Republican, super bipartisan, centrist, boring, just a complete empty suit, waste of space. The media has actually never ever said anything bad about this guy. I mean, really, ever. It's just innocuous. They never report on him. But then you look at a guy like me, and this is like true story. The Orlando Sentinel, when they endorsed in my race, and of course they endorsed the Democrat. But then again, they asked to interview me, and I wrote them a letter saying I would never interview them because they're a radical communist rag, all the rest of it. But the headline in the article was, vote for Stephanie Dukes, the Democrat in this race, over Anthony Sabatini, the worst person in the Florida Legislature. Right? That's how they actually phrased it. So how attacked you're being is basically the vetting test of how good they are. So, like, just as a shortcut, and like when you do your research, the Republicans that are being viciously attacked, like really badly, are usually the good ones, and the ones that they're saying like not good things, but just kind of ignoring, those are really the bad ones. I mean that quite literally. If the media's not saying anything about a Republican, they're just kind of ignoring them, that person's just not a threat to their narrative or to their issues or whatever. And so that's a huge red flag. And that's about 80% of the Republicans in Congress, right? They're just useless, innocuous, kind of boring, empty suits. They don't do it or say anything. They don't use any of their energy. They might vote conservative, but they're not using like their ability to their pulpit, right? I think the biggest strength a candidate has that they don't use is their pulpit. Like Gaetz uses his pulpit. And so he's always attacked or set up, and the deep state will come after him, et cetera, like they're doing now. But if they don't use their pulpit, then they're kind of like ignored. And that's the biggest thing that I think is like a helpful tool in the rubric of like who are the good guys versus the bad guys. Also, I mean, just your voting record, right? Club for Growth, American Conservative Union, all these big organizations have voting records, and you can see who's good and who's bad. And you look and say, wow, I can't believe that guy voted for all that big government. I thought he was like super conservative. And you'll see a lot of these guys just simply aren't.
Right.
There's different scores that, Club for Growth is good, but it's only fiscal. There's other things that are bigger than just fiscal that you gotta look at too. But definitely look at their scores. But the biggest is how much they're being attacked. That's why Marjorie Taylor Greene is arguably the top 3 best congressperson we have, because she's moving the issues and not afraid to fight the narrative and change the conversation. And none of these other Republicans have the balls she does. So.
Great. Thanks for the question, Pam, as always. Great questions. Dankold is up next. He's a mod from our server.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you for doing this AMA with us. Really appreciate it. So my question is, we hear a lot from Republicans about big government, but we never hear really enough from them about big businesses like Amazon or Walmart or Twitter or Facebook. And with recently also BlackRock with buying all the houses for a huge markup and then renting them out also for an even bigger markup. So my question is this: in addition to combating big government, what would you do to combat corrupt corporatism and crony capitalism in this country?
So I used to say, before a lot of people did, that big business is just as much of a threat to our country and to our liberty as big government is. I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's a much bigger threat. I think it's far bigger threat actually than government. Government's still a major threat, massive threat, but it's a little bit more hesitant to act because there's at least some political blowback towards what they do. Whereas with big business, there's no accountability. of them whatsoever for what they can do. Woke corporate behavior is sort of limitless and just purely evil, and it's scary what it's capable of doing, especially when it comes to big tech. So that's how I just generally feel about it, and I think we should be treating big businesses with as much scrutiny as anything. And the Republican Party and the conservative movement really needs to get updated and wake up and start to get rid of their 19th century mindset of, oh, that's a private company, so we're going to be hands off. Change it and ask the question of what's the, if anything is a threat to liberty and to our basic institutions in this country and to American sovereignty, it should be dealt with accordingly. It doesn't matter if it's a private or public entity. That's completely innocuous and meaningless distinction. Anything that's a threat should be shut down and dealt with. I'm actually, funny enough, I'm reading the audiobook by Josh Hawley, Tyranny of Big Tech, right now. So, which I heard was ghost written, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So that's how I feel about it. Sorry, did you have a more specific question at the end there, or was it just in general?
Yeah, I think you answered it fairly well. Is there something, I think a lot of us really look to the big companies and see a lot of the breaks that they're getting, that a lot of the smaller companies don't get tax breaks, TIFs, and other things like that. Is that something that you would be willing to approach? And do you think that would have a good impact on those businesses, or maybe even monopoly breaking? Some things like with Google Alphabet and Facebook and Twitter specifically. I think those ones are kind of the biggest ones for us because we see them. But even a lot of the pharmaceutical companies are really, really large, and they've kind of, what they do is they gobble up the little ones that are doing all the work, and then they grow even bigger off of those little ones too. So maybe there's something there as well as monopoly breaking.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm 100% no question about it for breaking up big tech. For me, they're an existential threat to the entire country. They're an evil corporate globalist woke company that wants literally nothing less than to destroy the middle class and destroy this country. They think they're bigger and better and more powerful in this country, in which in some cases they're more powerful, which makes them the biggest threat, one of the biggest threats to our country and our sovereignty and our values. So we need to break them up. It's not a debatable question at this point. I think any Republican that even slightly wavers on that issue should be just thrown out of the party. Our party cannot have any room for the people like Kevin McCarthy that believe there's some third way of dealing with these people. And there's just too much evidence out there to show that how people inside the big five tech companies of Amazon, Google, Twitter, Apple, Facebook actually think and act and what their goals are for us to have any dissent on that position whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right, Kakistani American, you're up next with your question.
Hi, Mr. Sabatini. Thank you for coming here and taking our questions. Mine is back to the size of government again. It seems over the course of this country's history, unfortunately, that not only has there been somewhat of an inexorable march left, in the sense that when the left gets into power, they aggressively pursue their agenda, and then when the right gets into power, they kind of just preserve status quo. There's also been an inexorable march up. This is perhaps on the more ambitious side, but given how few times in history there have been definitive steps to reverse that, some underrated presidents like Coolidge and the like, what would you do as a legislator to pursue the downsizing of federal government and giving some power back to the states, lowering the deficit, lowering spending, etc.?
Absolutely. So, now you're speaking my language. It's one of the topics I'm most passionate about. It's not the most popular one, but decreasing the size of the government. I will never vote for anything that increases the size of government, with the sole exception being tools necessary to destroy threats to the entire system, like big tech. If it means passing or creating something to deal with a threat like the tyranny of big tech, I'm for that.
but generally I don't want any more federal government, period. So, co-sponsoring things like Thomas Massey's bill and the Department of Education is a priority for me, and holding the Republican establishment accountable on those issues is a priority for me. But I will never vote for any tax increase. I've even voted for against the state budget. I was the only person in the state this year to vote against our state budget. Why? Because it increased government. I'm against increasing government across the board. I'm very principled in that position, but like I said, it's not like I'm psychotic about it. If it's something that helps protect the country in a meaningful way, like, passing some antitrust laws and financing it, or, military spending if we're really at war, not the insane military spending we have now, which, I'm for auditing the DOD and ending all the foreign wars and getting our, really downsizing what we have now. But in the long term, I would be open-minded on the position if we really were in war and those kind of things. But in general, I'm pretty centered on just no more size of government, because I don't just view it economically, view it morally. I think every time you increase government, you're dehumanizing people, because when you rob people of individual choice and you increase government decision making, you're dehumanizing people and taking away their agency, their ability to make decisions, and that's their moral identity and their personal identity. And so for me, it's a moral decision. You got to have less government. It's the right thing to do.
Great. All right. We're going to ask Blue Line back up. Thanks, Kekistani, for your question.
Thanks. So my question is, you talked about America First and kind of the pillars and what you believe. Really, part of America First is about ensuring that, our tax dollars go to make sure that America is put first, right? It's kind of basic in this idea here. But too often we see tax dollars go to either research and development that end up benefiting China, for example, or whatever it might be. And I just kind of am curious if you have thought about any, like, what can be done to kind of stop this flow of American tax dollars to China or China-backed companies that really are there to tear us down.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the first thing we need is just completely and totally prohibit it. No questions asked. We shouldn't have any company like there's companies that represent China and Chinese industries in DC, like Huawei or whatever it's called. I think that's how you pronounce it. They should just be blanket banned from lobbying our government, being in this government, being able to feed money into our government and be involved with our research institutions. We actually passed a law in Florida that prohibited it. We don't have any kind of Wuhan Institute, but we passed a law that would make it impossible for someone to surreptitiously, it would be criminal if they tried to hide it, but they wouldn't be able to surreptitiously, engage in research in the state of Florida and then feed it back to China. So that was a good bill that we did pass 2 years ago, which I'm happy about. But, we need that on the federal level. We just they are the biggest national threat to our country, in terms of a nation state. I still think the biggest threat to our country is from within. I think it's actually, woke global elites that want to destroy this country from within, just rob it from within and hollow out our middle class and our borders and all the rest of it. I think that's the biggest threat. And then number 2 is probably China. But just being tough with them and banning them and all the rest of it. It's like my good friend Matt Gaetz said to me. He said that, in the state legislature where I serve, the biggest special interest for like the big companies in the state, like Disney and these other sort of liberal companies. But he's like, in DC, the biggest companies or the biggest entities lobbying and the biggest special interests are just other countries. So like China and like countries in Asia and Africa, like, are actually just straight up paying money to get influence from our nation's leaders. It should be considered treasonous, but it's the way of doing business in DC. So we just need to put an end to it. That's, for me, America First means a lot of things. First of all, it means the biggest picture. For me, it just means stopping the systematic destruction of the middle class. And if you stop and think about it, that means a lot of different things. That means ending the foreign wars, which are draining our country. It means stopping, helping these foreign countries that are adversaries like China. It's also stopping globalism and corporate wokeism. It all comes back to the middle class. Because if you don't have a big, strong, healthy middle class in the country, there is no country. You just, it'll just fall apart. It won't be an identifiable country, put it that way. And if we don't make that our sole focus, we will lose the middle class. We'll just be nothing but a small percentage of extremely woke,
extremely wealthy, top tier, and then just a lot of poor people. A lot of poor people. It'll be like Brazil is the country it'll be most similar to.
Sounds like communism to me. Speaking of which, just had a quick thought when you mentioned China lobbying. What are your thoughts about Swalwell's honeypot girlfriend, and I think Barbara Boxer was it that had a driver that was a Chinese spy? How come the Democrats tend to get away with interactions with spies, and nothing is ever really done about it, especially on the national level?
It's because the Republican Party lets them get away with it. So like, to give you, people think I'm like really too critical of the Republican Party, but I just don't think they realize the opportunities that we lose as conservatives and by not holding our own side accountable. We're always so distracted by Pelosi and everything else. It's like, no, if you just hold your own leaders accountable, you can get a lot more done. So like Swalwell or whatever, who should be in jail for what he did, or at least stripped of all his committees. You know, when Kevin McCarthy takes power again, because I'll vote against him, but I'm a little pessimistic that I'll convince enough colleagues to get rid of him. I mean, actually, you know what? Let me take that back. There might be a chance we can prevent him from being speaker and get somebody else there. But whoever's there, if it's someone from the establishment, do you really think that they're going to say what? Oh yeah,
Biggs would be great. Yeah.
Chip Roy, Gosar. I have a lot of
There's some very good ones for sure.
But whoever it is, are they really going to hold Eric Swalwell accountable? Are they really going to expel him from all committees like they did to MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene? No, they're pansies. They're not going to do it. So we need to be holding them accountable to make sure they do that. You know, they can do it, but they probably won't do it. You know, we're not. I don't know if I hope we get the Senate and the House, but we know we're going to get at least the House. We're probably going to have a wave. We're probably going to get 20 or 30 seats. But who are we going to put in charge? Is it going to be a waste opportunity, or are we going to have or are we going to be fighting the way the left does? I mean, look what Pelosi's doing in the House right now. She's a tyrant. Are we going to be fighting as hard when we get the House, or are we going to just be pushovers and go back to, you know, softball politics? And, you know, that's my focus, is holding our own side accountable.
I think it's a good start. Very well said. All right, Damien, I know you have a question from a member you wanted to ask.
Yeah, Umbra wanted to know if it was possible for the state legislator or governor to expel or recall Nikki Fried from her position for suspending licenses of the January 6 prisoners.
Yeah, so per the Florida Constitution, you cannot impeach except for misdemeanors. It's different in federal houses, but in the Florida State Constitution, only a misdemeanor. So she hasn't committed technically a misdemeanor, but she did what I call malfeasance or misfeasance. You know, she's engaged in unethical behavior and somewhat unlawful, but she hasn't broken like a criminal law like a misdemeanor. So what does that mean? It means that we have options to punish her. Now, the RINO leadership of the House will probably sit on their ass and do nothing. But if I was speaker for the day, and what I'm pushing for, and if you read my social media, you'll see I've already done it, is I would open an immediate investigation. I would subpoena her, right? I would subpoena her like physically to come and testify, and have her open up the books and her staff open up the books and explain her decision making. And then I would pass statutes stripping her agency of all its power. So yeah, she's the Commissioner of Agriculture and the Department of Consumer Affairs. But what I would do is I would disempower those agencies, strip them of any kind of funding, money, move all of those duties to other agencies that are controlled by Republicans, like the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, or the Attorney General, or even the governor's agencies. They've done it before. There was one like environmental agency they didn't trust her with, so they stuck it in DeSantis's shop so that way he could control it. We just need to do that on everything. We just need to completely and totally disempower her and just eradicate any responsibility and power she has. We can do it legally, and we can do it tomorrow. But the pansies in charge of the legislature right now don't have the political wherewithal to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate. We're going to ask Matt. Go ahead.
That's it.
Okay. Magaspod, welcome to the stage. Go ahead and ask your question and see if you can ask.
Hi. So I just have like a highly hypothetical question that will never happen, but you know, let's go down this trail. So like, if Kamala Harris ends up getting 25th Amendment, you know, way into the presidency, she gets to pick a VP. One, who do you think that VP pick is going to be, and why can't we make it Donald Trump?
Oh, you're talking about if she's president. So if Biden died and she became president and she gets to choose the VP, who would she choose? Is that your question?
I believe that's what he asked. I'm not sure about the last part of that question, but definitely the first part.
I don't know why she would choose any Republican. She'd obviously choose a Dem. She'd probably choose somebody that was just not a threat to her, somebody who's like subservient, and she's young, and she'd probably try to finish her term without a person ever, be expected to vote, cross her in any way. She'd probably choose some innocuous. She's also very left wing, right? So she'd choose obviously a person that hit up all the identity characteristics, identity politics markers. So it'd be like a person of color, female, lesbian, or gay, whatever, whatever she could do to say, look at this important boundary I broke. And
maybe mayor of Chicago might be on the top of her list.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, no joke, that's something they would do,
Exactly. All right, we're going to ask G-Money back up real quick. G-Money, you're up. And you're muted.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, sorry about that. Sabatini, I guess my question is going to be back on the subject of Nikki Fried, with her trying to run for governor and all the stuff she's been doing recently. What do you think is the best way that Floridians can actually, come out and, rally against her getting this nomination, or, just prevent her in general from stealing votes from, legalizing pot or whatever? Like, what do you think that, we can actually do locally that will help secure that DeSantis vote instead of, people voting for her?
Well, very pragmatically, I would tell DeSantis to adopt my position, which is legalizing marijuana. If he came out strong for legalizing marijuana, which 2/3 of Republicans now like the idea of, and obviously it's way higher across the board with Democrats and Independents, he could really upstage her, and then she looks like a weak, she'll be like complaining and bitching about it for a while, and just looks weak, and just takes that issue off the table. So now she doesn't have any issue that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Continue.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that would really hurt her on that issue. But other than that, just ignore her. I mean, we're going to have a red wave. We'll win by 4%, 5%. I'm not too worried about her. I don't know if she'll even win the nomination. She's not fundraising very well. Charlie Crist looks like the bigger threat right now. So we'll see what happens.
Sounds good. Trump Team Atlas, you're up, and I think we can hear you now.
Cool. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
That's awesome. Okay. I go to a top 10. Oh, hi, Anthony Sabatini. I go to a top 10 STEM and sports school in the Southeast, which still requires excellence in truth seeking and developing useful nonverbal thought, which does happen. The experience of beauty and truth comes up, but this is actually rare. Like, it doesn't happen in like Harvard, or those schools have all, like, if you read, like, have you ever read the book Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom?
Yeah, it's not one of my all-time favorite books. I read it my last week in college, and it changed my life. It's one of my all-time favorite books.
Okay, mine too. So I can say that at my school, the discovery of truth happens because you can't do engineering or science without that, that discovery of truth. But you can do liberal arts without it. And but I guess, what do you think? Unfortunately, mediocrity is coming to Georgia Tech, and it's through the Trojan horse of diversity programs. These people are coming from these elite schools, but they know nothing, and they come here and they're basically planning on creating these programs that exist like at Harvard, where there's second-rate programs for like black students, which is what it's discussed in Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom, and all the other elite Ivy schools, where literally the black students are getting a second-rate education, and they're just there for their skin color, and people don't realize that, but that's coming to my school through our new diversity program, because we have people from PhDs from these second-rate programs. And they're good, and I don't really know. It's a national security issue, and I was just wondering, have you thought about this? And I don't know what they're doing, why they would be doing this, but they're planning on doing it.
Well, it's kind of a long, rambling answer speech or question speech, so I didn't really get the question. But if you're saying, are you against, what are we doing about race quotas? I'm against any kind of quotas, identity politics, and the best thing we can do in the state legislature, and Georgia is no different, is start defunding these leftist institutions and go back to a race neutral, colorblind society like Martin Luther King wanted. I mean, that's all they wanted, right, in the beginning of the civil rights era, and that's why everybody agreed. It's like, let's just go to a race neutral, colorblind society where race is not thought about, and that's the opposite of what the left wants now. So that's what I agree with. I would have been voting against the creation of Juneteenth and all this like super race conscious, radical left wing ideology stuff, and we just need Republicans that are tough enough to have that position, because most of these Republicans are so soft. They're so afraid of being called names and racist and everything else that they'll just vote any liberal nonsense that comes out because they just want to evade being attacked. And it's sad, and they're so willing to adopt a liberal perspective and speak in the language of the left and identity politics just to avoid being criticized. It's quite pathetic. So we just need better Republicans at the state legislature that can do that.
Do you think at the federal level it'd be possible to withhold federal funds from colleges that use race-based quotas in their admissions process? Since the Supreme Court hasn't done anything concrete to kind of go against some of that, is it something that would be definitely they've teetered on it?
The second best option. The best option is just defunding make sure there's no federal grants at all, no Department of Education, no grants, no money, no anything. Just get the federal government out of it. If you're not going to do that, then you got to make it race neutral. But obviously, the best is just get the hell out of the business.
For sure. All right. So I think we have one other to read first. Go ahead and Damien, go ahead and read the question that you have.
For sure. Somebody who asked this question, I think, to everyone that we've hosted. I don't think he had a chance to come tonight, but Nick Dobot is always curious what your thoughts are on the NFA and I guess what you would do about it if you had the opportunity. The National Firearms.
Totally shut it down. The National NFA or NSA. The National Firearms.
NFA Firearms.
1934. The National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act of '68 I would totally repeal. I'm not for any of the 20th century gun laws. I think they're all both unconstitutional, but also ineffective. Even if let's say they were purportedly constitutional, they're not doing anything helpful. They're just making more criminals out of law-abiding citizens. They're just bad laws. So I'm for getting rid of all of that, 100%. And I almost thought you said the National Security Act, which I think created the CIA. I'm for defunding that too. I think the CIA is a major threat to this country. And what the CIA and FBI have done in the last couple of years shows that they're corrupt probably beyond the stage of reform, and just need to be significantly defunded at this point.
Very nice. I think I'm in agreement with you there. Odie, welcome to the stage. If you have a question, go ahead and ask it.
Hi, Mr. Sabatini. Thank you for coming tonight. I am still learning a lot about our history and our founding documents, but the more that I learn, the more diehard MAGA I become. I was reading through the Declaration of Independence recently due to the holiday, and this snippet most stood out to me. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. It seems to me like we are almost at that point where the government is not doing anything for us and is only acting in its own interest. I feel like if the founding fathers were alive today, they would be at, Declaration of Independence again stage. Do you think, obviously you're fighting to turn the ship around, but do you think that we really can completely turn this ship around, or just how do you feel about what I've said?
Well, so two things. First, on that famous quote, which is like the second or third sentence in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, which everybody should read 100 times and read books on because it's such an important document for understanding the Constitution and everything in American history, really. Somebody put it on Facebook or Twitter or like said it in a class and was like censored or got in trouble, which is hilarious because it's so bold and strident, yet it's so essentially part of the entire meaning of the country that if a government does become destructive of those ends, that you have a moral authority and duty, to find a separate and equal station and basically to end the bans of the other government and start a new one. Today would get you in trouble. You'd be considered like a complete extremist if you said, which just shows you how scary and creepy this country is getting. To answer your second question, can we fix it? Can we right the ship and go back to normal? I'm optimistic. I actually think the answer is yes, but I think the answer is it gets worse before it gets better. I don't think that there's going to be some like red wave next year that everything just starts heading back in the other direction. I think really bad things will happen in this country. The left will do really bad things and cause a lot of really serious harm before people start to wake up. I think obviously the numbers are on our side. If you look at the middle class and the working class, once they kind of realize they're getting screwed by the global corporate left, the horrible people that are the regime that's in charge of this country, that hate this country and have used this country and have controlled both parties for a long time, I think there will be blowback and good things will happen. But will it be too late to save the country by the time those people wake up? We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think the first best thing we can do right now is break up big tech and get a normal citizen media going in this country. I think Donald Trump won in 2016 because big tech, it was powerful, but it really wasn't engaged in full-blown censorship yet like it was in 2020. And so people communicating in, shows like Breitbart or, InfoWars, all these things that they hate and call fake news, people just being able to communicate, their thoughts about how the country worked and operated, got enough people engaged and connected to say, you know what, this country needs a change of direction, and got Donald Trump elected. I don't think that was able to happen in 2020. And that, I've talked to a lot of friends at Breitbart News who say they've been throttled and, their algorithms, big tech algorithms have basically shut them down. I think the best thing we need to do is take them down and get open dialogue and First Amendment restored in this country and get people talking and thinking out loud again without punishment. And if you do that, we can start start the process of going back in a more positive direction. But that is the single most important thing we can do right now. Once that happens, I actually am optimistic that people will start to look at things and think in a material way of just, hey, which party is actually going to try to help improve me and my family's a lot, and which one is just gaslighting me and trying to, create a socialist state within this country. And I think good things will happen. But that's the first step.
Very good answer, Anthony. Thank you very much. All right, Palm, you're up with your last question.
Yes, I'll just go. I want to do a lightning round. I'll be quick. I have 3 questions if you're willing. First one is, what do you think about the hacks, quote unquote, on such systems like the pipeline, which I think are exploited by authoritarians, which they want to use that to never let a manufactured crisis go to waste?
Which pipeline?
I think it was an oil pipeline that was maybe about a month or so ago, where they
claimed it was the Russians that hacked it, or a Russian
government.
citizen.
Oh, yeah. I remember. I'm sorry. The news cycle is so insane these days. Every 2 weeks, it's like it blows your mind. Yeah, no, it was interesting, and it was funny to see the media, which is like I said before, one of the big threats to this country in the long term is this corrupt, woke corporate media. To see them go into full defense mode to try to deflate any theory about what happened. I'll be honest, I wasn't an expert on exactly what happened, but I think the big takeaway is simply that it's hard to figure out the truth about events, especially significant national environmental events, because the corporate woke media is going to be there to fact check and destroy any narrative that is critical of the ruling regime. And that's going to happen every time until we can really break the hold of big tech and the corporate woke media, which is really part and parcel of big tech.
So once we can do that, you can start having dialogue about significant events like that. Right now, it's impossible to, because we're just gaslit with like 50,000 articles in our Google alerts and everything you see on big tech. It's just deflating the idea that anything went wrong that day.
Right. Thank you for that.
I'm not worried about guys like me and you knowing what happened, but the general public won't be able to because they're just too busy.
Right. There's a lot of information gatekeeping. They do.
That's right.
Second question: are there sheriff brigades in your district, and do you support constituents and people in your area or anywhere asking local sheriffs if they're willing to enforce unconstitutional mandates, especially anti-Second Amendment laws?
Mm-hmm. Well, they do already, and they love to talk tough. You got a lot of the sheriffs that love to talk tough, and no one's going to tell me what to do. Blah blah blah. The federal government, if they try to tell me what to do, I'm the independently elected sheriff. I'm going to do my own thing. But the truth is, most of them are just crony institutionalists and part of the law enforcement community that simply will do whatever it takes to just hire up their own influence. If the federal government says we'll give you free money or let you work on these high-profile crimes or whatever, if you help us prosecute this sort of stuff, they'll do it all the time. There's only really one or two or three sheriffs in the state of Florida that are the true old school independent constitutional sheriff mentality of just no one's going to tell me what to do, and we're going to run our county the way we see fit. Most of them are just part of they've been sort of co-opted by the federal law enforcement agencies to, they've been sort of commandeered by the federal law enforcement agencies. You see that again and again and again, but they'll still get in front of the camera and talk tough. Like all the sheriffs in Central Florida enforce red flag laws, which are completely and totally unconstitutional. But these are the same. Some of those sheriffs will also get in front of the camera and say, we're against anti-Second Amendment laws that the feds are trying to put out. Yeah, well, you're already doing red flag laws, which is the end all be all. I mean, that's what the federal government wants, is to be able to have a red flag law statute nationally where they can just come to your home and grab all your guns because you went to a Trump rally or whatever. So yep. I don't have much faith in them. The voters need to get much better at choosing true constitutional sheriffs. Most of them just they kind of play the game and talk tough, but they're not really constitutional sheriffs like you see out west, or the guy in Ohio and Texas. You see a few of these guys on TV that are the real deal. We don't really have a lot of those in Florida.
Gotcha. All right, Blue Line, you're up for the last question.
Sure. Thanks again, Anthony. Thank you for joining us. So during the Trump administration, I had the opportunity to really see firsthand just how bloated the federal government was with duplicative programs and just out of control spending, just all around, right? And so I just wanted to kind of get your sense of if you've thought about if there's an agency in the entire federal government besides the NFA, which we've already talked about, that you think should be first on the chopping block, and if you've thought about kind of how you would go about trying to get some backing into killing that.
Wow, it's a really good question. I'm glad. I mean, I could take more questions, but that being the last one, I'm pretty happy that was last, because it's a really good question. It's hard to answer. I'd have to historically, I would have probably always said DOE, Department of Education, not just because of what they do, but because they plant the seeds for even more destruction. So the Department of Education will do grants and get more professors and woke people involved in the states that therein create more radical leftists that hate this country, who further spread identity politics. So it's like the federal agency that just keeps on giving. It's like if they spend $1 billion in a state, with grants and Common Core or whatever, it ends up like 10 times what usually you could create in terms of leftism with $1 billion you're going to get long term, because it's like self-replicating. They're just planting seeds and destroying the country in the long term. I'd say DOE, but right now it seems like we have an even bigger existential threat with the FBI, or one of the national security agencies, because the national security state in this country right now is just straight up. I mean, they won't do anything on the big threats like Black Lives Matter and Antifa, but they'll straight up round up patriots and just throw them in jail and just destroy their lives and hurt them and dox them and all the rest of it. So I would have to go with one of the national, probably just the national, one of the national security agencies, because they're an existential threat to people's material livelihood in a real meaningful significant way. So I'd have to say them first and then DOE second. So good question.
Very, very based answers. Thanks, Anthony. All right. Well, I wanted to say thank you for joining us today, and also for everybody else joining tonight and listening. If people, I know that there are a couple of people in here who actually live in your district. If they wanted to volunteer and to help your campaign out, I know it's really early still, but any volunteering, it helps tremendously. Or a place where we can go and donate if we don't live in the district, or even if we do live in the district. Where would we go find out more about you, Anthony, and where we could do those things?
Sure. Yeah. So my website is sabatiniforcongress.com. Obviously, I would encourage everyone to go in there and check it out. And if they want to donate, the truth of the matter is, even if you don't want to donate a lot, even if you gave just $5, having a high donor count is important. It's important to tell people you have a lot of support. I have 2,200 donors and trying to get that number up. So even $1 or $5 is big. So if you wanted to do that, and then of course I'm on every social media platform until we destroy them. You got to use them to connect other patriots. So I do use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Telegram, everything. Just Sabatini, Sabatini. I encourage you to follow me. I got the biggest social media following in the state behind DeSantis and Gaetz. So check me out, follow me, and I'll keep you up to date on what we're doing in Florida and also the congressional election and then just national politics too.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Anthony, and for everybody, have a good night.
Thanks, guys.